Good morning, everybody. I'm Larry Jacobs. This is Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio, and it's December 12th, 2023. We have a wonderful show for you. Right now, let me turn off this music. It's going to be a real pleasure because one of our guests is calling in from Asia, from Singapore. It's really great. And our other two guests are on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. Here in Maine, there's no snow on the ground, so we must have something in common right there. I've got Peter Paccone here, my favorite social studies analyst, if I may, the amazing social studies teacher from San Marino, California. All right, Richard Whitrock is here. I'm going to talk to Richard. Richard is an American educator specializing in the humanities who was taught at international schools, lucky him, in Europe, in the Middle East, and Asia. And let me just read this. He has experience in American, British, and IB diploma program educational systems, and he is in Singapore. And we've also got with us from Southwest Washington, we can't wait to hear what district it is Shari Condit. Shari's an award-winning civics teacher, and today we're going to be talking about thoughts on teaching about January 6th and other controversial topics. And I'm an old social studies teacher, emphasis on the old, so you know it's going to be a good show today. We're going to archive the show over at ace-ed.org, ace-ed.org. That's the home website of our American Consortium for Equity in Education. And we got all kinds of news over there about our Excellence in Equity Awards. We got our magazine, Equity and Access, over there. And we also have this podcast, all the podcasts we've ever done, plus incredible news about equity in K-12 education right across the board. And I'm really looking forward to today's show. So I ask you to please check out everything we do over at ace-ed.org. And with that in mind, let me say good morning to the only guest I know. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Larry. How are you?
I'm fine, buddy. It's good to have you back here.
Hey, it's nice to be back. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday before the Tuesday before Christmas. So thank you very much.
Exactly.
Seasonings greeting. As they like to say at the Spice Factory, seasonings greetings to you. Get it? Seasoning?
Very nice.
Yes, sorry. It's a bad joke. I won't. There's a long way to go for a bad joke. And we do have something in common. I think I have this in common with all my guests. There is no snow on the ground, even though I live in Maine. So I'm feeling warm when I look out the window. That's all I have to say. Okay?
Certainly no snow here.
I know that. In LA area. Are you there, Shari?
I am.
Shari, I'm Larry Jacobs. Call me Larry, and welcome to Education Talk Radio. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
That's great. And you are in what district are you in?
I teach in Woodland School District, so small little district. We're between the Columbia River and Mount St. Helens. So.
Wow. I just saw a wonderful documentary that talked about the volcanic explosion at Mount St. Helens, and I actually, obviously in a commercial jet, flew over Mount St. Helens about 3 weeks after it exploded. Wow. You live in a dangerous world.
We do. You know, I mean, some people prepare for all sorts of drills. We prepare for a volcano eruption drill.
Yeah, so. I suppose you have a lava canoeing team or something, I would imagine.
It's a brilliant idea. You could get a varsity letter in it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just insulate the canoe is the best I can tell you. All right. You know, I have a good friend who's the superintendent down in West Valley. Are you familiar with that district at all?
Yeah.
In Yakima? Near Yakima. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Peter Finch is a good buddy of mine. Okay, and and I thought maybe by chance you were in the same district. But you're not.
No.
Okay, so
a little further away.
Yeah, it's okay. You live in a beautiful part of the world. Okay, and actually, you're elevated where you are. Is there snow?
So funny enough, where my town is, like the actual school is maybe at 50 feet elevation, but my students live upwards of 3,000 feet elevation. So.
Yep.
So while we don't get snow down here, upriver, that's what they call it, they do have snow.
Yeah, my wife got stuck in a Washington State blizzard coming back from but I can't think of it, the Apple capital of Washington State. Mm-hmm. Okay, and she drove home. It was clear weather. Halfway there up the mountain, she had to turn around and go back. It was a blizzard. Okay,
yeah,
happens
you just never
all
know
the time.
Around here.
You'd never know. Okay, let's swing over to Singapore. Richard, are you there?
Yes, sir. Happy to be here.
And I guarantee you there's no snow in Singapore this week.
Not outside malls.
Wow, it's just what's life in Singapore like? Tell me about this. Go ahead before we get into this. Life in Singapore by Richard Whitrock.
The first thing to get used to with life in Singapore is that the weather never changes.
Wow,
it is
like San Diego.
About 88 to 90 every day.
Wow.
High humidity, and it never changes. So it's nowhere near as hot as Houston or Middle East or anywhere else, but it's also, there's no seasons. There's rainy and slightly rainier.
Every day sounds like Florida in the afternoons. And I must ask this question before we move on here. Have you been to the Raffles Hotel? Isn't that in Singapore?
It is in Singapore, and I have been inside the hotel. I've not stayed in the hotel. And this is surprisingly rare outside of Mexico and Texas and the Southwest. Mexican food is very hard to find, and there is an actual Mexican grocer nearby. So I will go to get my my grocery fix every once in a while and take the opportunity to see the Raffles Hotel.
Good for you. And the Raffles is famous. It's always been in the movies where spies hang out in white jackets and Panama hats. Okay, that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, serving the Singapore sling.
Yeah, exactly. And where the fans are always rotating. I got a picture in my mind. Okay, and while I envy you, I think a lot of people, teachers envy you when we talk about you teaching in the Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. I mean, it's just fantastic. I congratulate you on that.
Well, thank you. We definitely took a leap, and it's been working out for us so far.
How long have you been doing it now overseas?
8 years.
Wow, good. You've been to all those places in 8 years? Europe?
We have.
Wow.
Europe. So we were in what is now North Macedonia, and at the time they were very insistent it is just Macedonia, and it will never be North Macedonia. Then we were in Abu Dhabi, and now we've been to Singapore and been to visit all kinds of places ever since.
Okay, you want to hear my I'm the only person in the world who has an Abu Dhabi joke. Do you want to hear it?
Sure.
Shari, you want to hear my Abu Dhabi joke?
I love a good joke.
The people of Kuwait never watch the Flintstones, but the people of Abu Dhabi do. Abu Dhabi do?
Very nice. No. Dad jokes are always welcome.
The people of Kuwait Kuwait never watch the Flintstones, but the people of Abu Dhabi do. Well, anyway, we'll see what's going on there. That's the only Abu Dhabi joke I know. Okay, so we'll go on from there. Anyway, hey, I've got to find my good buddy, Peter.
Yes, sir, right here.
Yeah, we got controversial topics all over the place. And by the way, I do want to mention something. Peter is a iCivics fellow. And I would be remiss if I did not say that the person who runs iCivics is a good friend of mine and my wife, Louise Dubé, and we lost Sandra Day O'Connor a couple of weeks ago. And I'd be remiss if I didn't bring that up. It must have come up a lot in your work with iCivics, right, Peter? You know Louise.
Yeah, I didn't know you knew Louise. That's cool.
Oh, we know Louise well. Yeah.
Oh, very nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And
we did lose the justice, but we also have Sonia Sotomayor now at the helm there, which is really nice.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's a good group.
Very much involved.
Louise and Carolyn worked together at GBH. Okay, and then Louise left there to become the head of the iCivics. Yeah,
I did not know that.
Quite well.
I respect her greatly, and
as you should.
I loved working there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great, and I'm glad you're involved in that. And speaking of civics, here we go, January 6th. Today is that was a good segue, December 12th, 2023. So we got about 3 weeks or so until January 6th rolls around. And it is a responsibility of educators to talk about such things. And that's what I'm going to ask. Today's a bipartisan age. People get mad at how you say it and when you say it and how you say it. Peter, I'm going to start with you, and you can even help me co-host this show. Okay, Peter, January 6th, how do you teach it? That's the simplest question. How do you teach January 6th, and it is an important day, okay, in U.S. history. And I'm going to ask the other two. And by the way, I have to say, it's going to be very interesting to hear what international students have to think about this and how we approach it with them. But first, Peter, over in San Marino, California.
Sure. Depending how I teach, it depends on which class I'm teaching in history or government. But before I go there, you'd mentioned that it's responsibility of social studies teachers to teach it. And yes, I understand that and accept that view and respect that view. But I did some straw polling before coming to the show here, various Facebook groups I belong to and other teacher groups. And, boy, I'll tell you, it's all over the place. There are probably 30-40% of teachers who say absolutely not the responsibility of teachers to teach it, way too controversial. Or even if it is our responsibility, we should steer clear because there's just no safe place. No matter what you say, you're going to get hammered. Stick with the curriculum. And, of course, most of that, whether you're talking history, gov, history in particular doesn't really go up to that present. Certainly works better in a government class. But, as for me, for some odd reason, right after it happened, the very next day, I taught it. And I brought it in. I said, hey, let's all look at this. Did you hear about it? And then I had developed a lesson plan that morning, which was we're not going to be stuck having, in a history class, we're going to be stuck having to give this thing a name. Historians will give it a name. Was it an insurrection? Was it a rebellion? Should we call it a riot? There was a noted individual who right off said, this is the start of the next American Revolution, and sort of a first battle in a new war of independence. And so that's what I put before my students on that first day, was an opportunity to just look at it, search online a little bit, see what they could find out, and what do they want to name it, or what do they think it will be called. And then keep in mind, Larry, in a history class, by that point in January, we've already covered things like Shays Rebellion and the Whiskey Rebellion, Turner's Rebellion, even Bacon's Rebellion. I mean, those are a core to the U.S. history course by that period of time, especially the AP U.S. history course. So, why are those things? Why did those things get called rebellions? And then, why is there something called the Greenwood Insurrection or the Wilmington Insurrection? Why do certain things get certain names? I mean, Boston Tea Party, for example, is that not an insurrection? Is that not a rebellion? Why do we call that a party? Right? And so you put that kind of stuff out in front of them. And John Brown was a raid. Why is that not either an insurrection or a rebellion or a riot or whatever the case you want to call it? So I just put that in front of them, and it was a nice way to start off the year. Sort of looking at a current event and then tying it back to things that they had learned in the class already, and making sure that they know those, because for the exam, the AP exam, they do need to know those. And in my AP Gov class, I didn't do anything. But then this year, for the first time, I just used the power of AI, and I created a presidential pardon for a presidential pardon for the protesters. And I asked the students, what do you think? If you were the president, would you sign this thing? We're not able to devote immense amounts of class time to this very difficult question, but a period or so, and so they were able to.
That's a great question.
Frankly, on both questions, how should it be named, and should we pardon? The 40% or so just didn't want to engage. They just didn't either have an opinion or they didn't want to engage. I give them the permission to, I don't know, or I decline to answer. So, only about really 60% jumped in. And then this year also, just with the pardon question, I finished it off by letting them try to respond to that question about the pardon in the form of an essay up on this thing called Class Companion, which we can talk about if you want, but instant feedback,
I know you love that.
Instant feedback on their essay. Yeah, so that's how I did it this year.
Yeah, and actually, by the way, you're right. I did say you have to teach it. Of course, nobody has to teach it. All right, but it is something that's on everybody's mind, and we don't avoid it in other areas. And I think we don't have to avoid it in this. And your way of explaining that, just by asking the question, what do we call it, and going through the little bit of history. Okay, the Shays Rebellion, the Whiskey Rebellion, you can go right down the list, the Wilmington Rebellion, etc., John Brown. Okay, you start to put it into a perspective. that these things have happened before, which a lot of people don't realize or put it together. Okay, it's that, and that alone, okay, is a great way to approach this. I'll go ladies first, if I may, Shari, or ladies second, I should say now, Shari Condit. Okay, what are your thoughts on it? Ladies second, that's one of the things we...
I mean, doesn't that feel like it's been the historical trend?
I know. I don't know where this women and children first thing happened. I've been studying the Titanic trying to figure that out. It just doesn't seem right
Fair
for some
enough.
reason. But
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say I'll add on to some things that Peter said. So first of all, language is a minefield, right? So the words that we use with our students anytime we're describing anything.
You haven't learned that this week with the 3 university presidents. Okay, you haven't learned anything, but go ahead, yeah.
Right. Like, and
language is a minefield.
It's the things that you don't think people are going to jump on, right? The words that you use, oftentimes, they truly are reflective of our own thinking. And while to us that makes sense, to others, especially if you're seeking negative intentions, we have to be really thoughtful. So when I teach January 6th, and I'll back up to say where I was on January 6th, I was teaching kids live. And when I say live, we were hybrid, we were all virtual at that time.
Oh, wow.
And
right.
So I had my students in a virtual setting. We were watching C-SPAN. We were watching the vote count. And I think people forget that's the point of January 6th. Like, they were counting the votes that day. And so what was interesting is we were supposed to have an elector Zoom into our classroom to talk about what it was like to be an elector. Wow. And so as a result, I wanted them to watch the vote count. So we're literally getting ready to watch this process where all eyes are on C-SPAN. And then this thing unfolds. And, I've been teaching, this is year 24. So I'm old enough to remember being in the classroom live when 9/11 happened. And in some weird way, it was kind of the same feeling, which is when students are looking at you, in this case virtually, and wanting to know what's going on. And I don't have the wisdom to be able to explain, or the word choice to be able to explain in the moment what is going on. And so we just purely live in the world of observation at that point in time. Because otherwise I'm going to get myself in trouble with words that I'm using because my political perspective might bubble up. So how do I teach it now? I teach it in context. So, for example, when I'm teaching World War II, I teach Pearl Harbor in the context, Pearl Harbor Day, in the context of World War II. I'm teaching January 6th actually much the same way. My plan is to teach it tomorrow. In my AP government class, we're going through the electoral cycle. We'll be going through the electoral college today. Tomorrow, we'll deal with the electoral count, and then eventually the inauguration. And so we'll have a discussion about the fact that this event occurred in 2021 at the time of the reading of the ballots. So that's my intent. It isn't necessarily to carve out even additional attention on January 6th. Because I think it's important that they see
let me ask you this. When you bring up January 6th to your students who are high school kids, okay, what's their reaction? Do they shrug it off, say, oh, yeah, January 6th? Or do they understand that it might be an extremely important thing in their lifetime? Do they get the perspective in their lifetime?
I don't know. I think... And this is not to denigrate by any means. I think a lot of young people have a hard time of knowing what's a significant event or not.
Of course.
Because they are living through history and they're living through a lot of significant events. And I think they get tired of hearing this is a significant event, right? COVID is a significant event. Invasion of Ukraine is a significant event. Like, what's happening in Israel with Hamas is a significant event. And so this is like, they're living in unprecedented times. And my kids will tell you, I'm tired of living in unprecedented times.
I don't blame them. So am I, by the way.
It feels like everything is precedented. So when it comes to January 6th, I'm not so sure that it has as much of an impact on them because they don't have the perspective yet to know what we know at our ages to see, wow, this is unusual. I'm not sure that they know what norms are, what's usual yet. And so it becomes our responsibility to set the standard to say this is what typically happens. This is abnormal.
That's the question. Do you want it? Do you want them to feel like there should be a big impact on it?
I want them to see that this is abnormal. I think it's important that they acknowledge that. When we watched the 2020 debates, and I had them do it virtually, we Zoomed in together as a class, and we're watching this. And after one of the debates, I had the students kind of come together and said, okay, well, what are your thoughts? They didn't realize that the barbing at each other and sort of the tenor of the behavior of both of the candidates in one of the 2020 debates was so abnormal. That's and right. It occurred to me, like, why don't they see it? Why don't they understand it? And I realized they don't have a reference point. So I literally had to go back and show them 1960 to see what Kennedy and Nixon's debate are like, where they're complimenting each other throughout the entire event. Or 1992. Wow. Like, they don't have that sense. So I think that we have to get them to a point where they realize that this was an abnormal event. And the only way you can do that and be thoughtful about language choice is to literally turn them over to the primary sources themselves, so that I'm not the facilitator of that information. I'm not the person telling them this is it. They have to discover it themselves. But you have to give them the tools to do that.
Yeah, and by the way, is it a rebellion, an insurrection, a party?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Sherry?
So,
Great question,
Peter, it is. We've already looked at all those words. And so, I just like Peter, my kids are having the same conversations about, like, what is a massacre? The Boston Massacre, is it a massacre? What makes a rebellion? How do you know what a rebellion is? How do you know what an insurrection is? So, to be fair, I'm not sure that we have a working definition as a class, because it still comes with perspective. And I encourage the kids to create their own definitions throughout the course of the 2 years. I generally loop with my students from junior year into senior year. So they may have a working definition that might differ from mine, but we've had conversations about what these things look like. And I allow them to live in the perspective of the language choice they're choosing, as long as they can define it and clearly evidence why it is to them this word choice, insurrection, rebellion. So does that make sense?
And I love the way you're all going to hear from Richard in a second, but I love the way, we have to be very careful not to bring our own politics into it. Okay, or maybe the other way to say it is to say what your politics are, so the kids understand where you're coming from. Okay, that you are a human being with political choices as well. It's an interesting question right there, Shari. That was great. Thank you. Even better than what Peter did. Okay, so you get an A, Peter gets a B+. Okay.
All right.
Oh no! And now Richard, I'm going to go down even further.
Well, no, there is an A+ available. There is an A+ available. Okay, so Richard from Singapore. God, sounds like you're right next door to me. The miracles of communication. Singapore. What time is it?
Yeah.
Wait, what time is it in Singapore? What day is it?
It's coming up on midnight. We're 14 hours ahead of Central Time Zone.
You're 14 hours, so you would be. I got to do the math. So you would be 13 hours ahead of me. So it's 6 minutes of midnight.
Yep.
On Tuesday.
Yeah.
It'll soon be Wednesday.
Thankfully, I'm an insomniac, so this is really not that bad.
Well, and I was just going to say thank you for being up so late. I appreciate it. Okay, because it's really early in the morning out where our other guests are. I don't know how this happened. That it must be something to do with an international dateline or something I've heard about. Okay, has to stop and end somewhere.
I will tell you that, the daylight savings, because not everywhere observes it, does complicate matters often.
Yeah, I can only imagine. But happy midnight and good luck with all that today. I got to ask you, Richard, are you teaching American kids or are you teaching students from Singapore? Who are you teaching?
It's both. Although actually having students from Singapore in international schools is actually very rare. For Singapore, if you hold a Singapore passport, it's actually very difficult to get approval to go to an international school instead of a local school. So most of the international students here are at least dual citizenship if they're Singaporean. But it's still very rare. That being said, international schools, as you can imagine, have students from all over. The same was true in the Middle East. Same was true in Europe. Some of it is when you get large numbers of people who work in international jobs in general, whether it's ExxonMobil or any other corporation, to attract people to move their families to another country, they have to be able to, well, this post is only a 4-year job, so they need to have an education. They can go back to the U.S. and pick up where they left off. But you say the A+ is available.
Let me just continue on that. Of your class, okay, this is important in light of the conversation on January 6th. How many kids are American? I don't know how many kids are in a class, but how many kids are you teaching that are American, and how many kids from other nationalities? Because everybody's got to look at this differently, I would think.
Yeah, and different schools are going to have different amounts. Singapore is a huge city. It's very different than Skopje, which is not nearly as large. But about 10% of my students now are either American or dual citizenship American and.
Okay. Okay, so they are American, and then so about 90% of your students are from other countries, other nationalities, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Although the funny thing I find about that, by the way, is that they all have American accents. Every one of them.
They all watch TV. Are you kidding me? That's why. Yeah.
Exactly. I have students, because it's mostly a British school that I'm at right now, I have students whose parents have thick Cockney accents, and their kids sound like they're from Alabama.
Are you teaching at Hogwarts by any chance? Ask that question. Get that out of the way.
No, not quite Hogwarts.
No, okay. Okay, good. Good. So there's no Quidditch team, and we won't get into that right now. So now, January 6th, do kids from other countries even care about it? Does anybody care about it in Singapore? Yeah, let's hear about it. What's their reaction?
Absolutely.
You'll love this, Shari,
Peter,
for your next class. You can go into this with them. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just because the U.S. has a leadership role, which it very much does, but it's also because so much of the media that they consume is U.S.-centric. I mean, it's kind of the legacy of Hollywood. It's kind of the legacy of networks. And that's, YouTube is American-owned. And you put the trifecta together of all the things they look at, and it's very America-centric. So aside from the fact that what happens in America is very effective of what happens in their home countries, it's very much personally effective because it's so much of what they see.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Keep going.
You mentioned that A+ was available. I don't think I'm going to get it. I mean, aside from the fact that
you got tough competition.
Peter is fantastic.
Yeah.
I disagree with quite a bit of the conclusion. I'm happy to take devil's advocate side on this one. And it's mostly because of that international experience. The catalyst for me, my first international experience, I'm from Houston. And I was abroad when Harvey hit.
You're from Houston?
Yes.
Sorry about
I am
Texas,
from Houston.
but let's move on.
36 years.
Okay. Yeah. Let's move on. Yeah.
Well, I was there when Harvey hit, and it's strangely emotional to be away.
The floods.
Yeah. To watch so much of what you know and so much of your past be affected so strongly. And it's near impossible not to let that show. They may not know why you're feeling or the depth that you're feeling, but they can see it. They can see that it's hard on you to experience that. And, being an American abroad and watching January 6th, that was hard. It was emotional. And I don't necessarily think that's entirely something we should fully avoid. I very much hear and understand. I mentioned that I'm from Houston. I actually taught in HISD, and so looking at what's happening in HISD and the idea of, you really don't want to shake too many trees there, very much understood, right? But the best teacher I ever had in my life was my AP government teacher in high school. And he had a policy. He had no problem talking about his own political orientation, but it was a very specific way. At no point would he ever brook disrespect for somebody else's political opinion.
Hard to do.
He was very much of the opinion that you should be respectful, and that if we hide it, we teach that politics is something to be ashamed of, or something that you can't discuss. And so a lot of the things that we need to talk about and learn and, make important decisions about get hidden. And he very much believed that that wasn't necessary, that it was more important to teach mutual respect than it was to hide. And that's been very influential to me. I don't disagree at all with the idea that, you run risks when you do that. And for some teachers and in some districts, those are real risks.
They're real risks.
And in
absolutely.
other ones, and in other places, there are risks of, the student won't listen anymore because he disagrees with me and I've lost him as a student. But there's also a flip side to that. Children can tell when you're honest. They can tell when you're hiding things. They know it. They don't always know what you're hiding, but they can tell. And sometimes that distance is absolutely necessary, and sometimes that distance creates barriers. And sometimes you can convince students to care about something, to care about learning, by bridging that small bit of gap and letting them see that you're a person.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very much where I come from on that particular subject.
So January 6th
Larry,
comes around. What? Oh, please, Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, can I just jump in here? So I've known Richard for several years now, and Richard, you've been A+ in my book from the very beginning. I think you could probably remember why. And
Richard, that's why you don't have Peter as a teacher, because he's prejudiced. He's prejudiced. He's prejudging your A+, where I am completely neutral. You still have a chance of getting one. Okay, go ahead.
I had a feeling Richard would say something like this, but I didn't ask him, up front whether he was going to. And so this kind of piggybacks on what Shari said earlier about words are a minefield. Silence is also a minefield on this on these controversial issues, because I got to tell you, again, with my I've observed it, I've been accused of it, and certainly there are a fair share number of teachers when I straw polled here for in anticipation of appearing on the show today. There are a fair share number of teachers who say, if you do not share your politics with your students at this point in time, and this is almost exclusively said by teachers who are in opposition to Trump, then you are basically staying silent in the face of evil is their position, and that's wrong. It's disingenuous, and you should bring forth. And so, Richard, I've got you here now. I'm just going to ask you up front: is that, in essence, what you're saying? Is that the teacher really at this point, and if you do, I mean, I respect the position, but should let them know about how they feel about January 6th?
I wouldn't say that's fully my position. Actually, a better way to understand my position. Have you watched the TED Talk with Ken Robinson, where he talks about education as it was designed by the British, who wanted people who could add, subtract, read, and do basic things, and that's all it was designed to do.
The call for creativity.
A lot of what he talks about there, the creativity part. A lot of what he talks about there is that there's changing needs in education. And one of the ways that I look at it really has much more to do with, we live in that time of everyone walks around with magic answer boxes. Memorization of facts is not as important as ability to know what to do with those facts and how to use them and how to think with them. And so I think that hiding the politics in some way is essentially saying that all information, no matter its quality, no matter its source, all information is perfectly equal. And while it is important to avoid offending people, it kind of gives, in some ways, it does give a false legitimization. But more importantly, it doesn't arm them for what they need for the 21st century. It's not
I love that.
teaching them how to deal. It's teaching them, okay, this is what their position is, and this is what's happened, and here are the facts. And then it doesn't give them those skills. It doesn't give them the ability to evaluate and to think beyond, well, this side is saying this thing, this side is saying another. How do I decide between them? And if you present them as both equals to avoid offending anyone or to avoid making someone angry, you've absolutely given them the information they need, but have you given them the skills? Have you really thought about the creativity part, but also the skill part, the what to do? Or are you kind of content with the addition, subtraction, multiplication, reading, just the basic parts. We don't need you to think. And I don't think that world is what any teacher wants. Sure.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, can we still engage in civil discourse even when, can our classroom still engage in civil discourse on a variety of political topics even when we don't share our personal political perspectives? Like, can you still do that?
I can absolutely say you can, but I can also absolutely say it's gotten a lot harder because for so long that has been the approach. Like, to really understand, Peter, you mentioned, this is exclusively coming from, people who are very, very anti-Trump. When I was in high school and in middle school even, I walked around carrying Rush Limbaugh books. That was where I was in middle school and high school. That's my background. I'm not there anymore. But the point is, because I had training specifically with debate, but also with that experience, an adult who said it's okay to think differently and was skilled at teaching us how to disagree and still be respectful. That's why I say that's so influential to me, because we can do those things. But that is also a skill. And if you don't learn skills or don't lose skills, then it's harder to do.
Larry?
I just wonder.
I just want to say one thing. What years were you talking about when you were talking about walking around with Rush Limbaugh books? Rich?
I think I'm the baby in the group. So you mentioned flying over Mount St. Helens, which was in 1980. I was born a few months later.
Okay, so I have to, and the reason I'm asking, and I think Shari was, when were you born? Or, I don't mean to answer that. Let me just say, were you born? I'm naming you the baby of the group, Shari.
I'm not. I'm in the Carter administration. I'm a Carter administration kid. So.
Well.
In high school, I watched the Watergate hearings. So there you go, guys.
Well, I'm aging myself here. I flew over Mount St. Helens with the Wright brothers. So.
Larry, can I ask you a question?
Who, me?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
When you were a social studies teacher, did you ever share your politics on any subject, your stance on any political issue?
When I was teaching, which was back in the 70s, okay, when I was teaching, okay, politics, and I know you're not going to believe this, it rarely came up. And even when we were talking about Watergate and all that, there was no bipartisan problem, and there was no partisanship. Okay, we all just listened to each other and talked because the parties were much more reasonable back then. And I'll tell you how I know that. I just did a show earlier this morning, and all my life I thought Jacob Javits was a Democrat, and I found out today he was a Republican. Okay, and he was one of the more liberal senators there was. So it was a different time and a different era back then. And I don't know if the kids guess my politics, but that kind of thing never came up anywhere. It just didn't exist. That's a long time ago.
If you were teaching today, would you have shared your views on the impeachment, or you would have?
I would, because it gives the kids a perspective, okay, of where it's coming from. Because students have to understand this. Teachers are not the font of knowledge, okay? We have other reason to be there, but it's not just to give our opinion on stuff, okay? We have to teach them the skill. You said it a minute ago. We teach them the skills they need and give them the skills to interpret the information we're giving them, okay? So I think it's very important, in my opinion, to let kids know at least how you feel, not picking on the other side, but just saying your side. That's what I feel.
And if I could follow that up, I'm just curious, Shari, Richard, on the impeachment. And I did not. I mean, my superintendent is my mentor, and the only former superintendent, only issue that I ever shared my politics on, and it was because it was overheard and then immediately spread. So I went, okay, it's out. Was on the issue of whether or not marijuana should be legalized for recreational purposes, and I took the position no, and I can give you the reasoning for it, but whatever. Did you guys share your opinions on the impeachment trial? If I could put you on the spot there.
I mean, we watched it. I don't know if I would share I don't share my opinions, and maybe, I mean, to be fair, we all do in some context, right? Again, language matters. It's the degree to which the students can pick up our language choice, and they're trained to do that. But I really, really try to keep myself in check. So instead, whenever I'm dealing with an issue such as impeachment or any other type of perceived controversial issue, and I want to use the word perceived because I think that's important, I want the kids to be the observers, right, without me being the filter. So we're going to watch it. Yeah. I'm going to ask them what their thoughts are. We're going to engage in civil discourse. We're going to use all the tools that we've been practicing along the way. So we watched the impeachment. I asked them, how would you vote?
Shari, did they ask you what your thoughts are?
I always tell them right off the bat, I'm not going to tell you what I think. No, they see me as the neutral party, and that's something I've been able to uphold my 21 years in this district. I'm really proud of it. And the students in the community seem to echo and recognize that that's a hard thing to do when you teach this course.
It is. It is.
But I work really hard to do that for them because I need them to trust me in the classroom if I'm going to teach these things. If I'm going to talk about abortion and marijuana, they got to trust me. So I don't play both sides though. I play I'm not your filter. You're going to figure this out. So we watched the impeachment. And we looked at what the issues were, and then I asked them, how would you vote? Why would you vote the way you did? I'm not going to tell them what my perspective is per se. But I also think, and I don't want to derail because I want Richard to be able to answer the question too, it's also about knowing your kids and your community.
Yeah.
I think there's not a one-size-fits-all approach because of the natures of our communities. My community is pretty rural, and we're pretty purple, even though Washington is a blue state. And I can't afford to marginalize or ostracize a kid who has a different perspective than I might hold or than somebody else in the room, because if you can't trust me to teach, topic A, you're not going to trust me to teach topic B, and then we're going to be dealing with school board, fights in front of a school board. That doesn't benefit us at this point. So I'd much rather teach them the skill of how to work with information they have. Yeah. So that's my 2 cents.
That was those 2 cents are worth a nickel. Inflation. That's great.
Do I get an A+, or is there a curve here?
You do. You're getting there. You're getting there, but it still could be a tie. I don't want poor Richard, his almanac, to feel left out here. Okay. Kyle, I'm curious about this, and Peter wanted me to ask this question, and I love this question. What about your colleagues? How are they teaching? Does it come up in the faculty room at all? Shari, I'll let you go next.
I can tell you that my colleagues are very nervous to talk about it.
Really? There you go.
Yeah. Mine too.
So, do you mean social studies teachers or all teachers? Social studies or all teachers?
Social studies teachers.
Okay, social studies. So were they just avoided, do you think?
In all fairness, I'm not certain that it's being addressed at all, and I don't fault them for that per se. Some of it has to do with number of years of teaching. Does that make sense? I think our newer to the profession teachers may fear the risk. I think there's some of that. So I'm mindful of that. It's a little easier when you're a veteran and you've built that reputation with your community.
Exactly. Peter, what's your thought on that? How about the rest of the gang in San Marino?
Most teachers I know, and I did ask my colleagues, and I think the word that came through was I teach it incidentally. And
fair.
Same reaction. Yeah.
Teach it incidentally. They actually didn't say that. They didn't say that.
What's that?
Did they say it like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What is that? What the hell does that mean? What does that mean?
Well, let's just say.
Happy January 6th. There was a thing at the White House. Now let's move on and talk about World War I. What does that mean?
Again, I've talked to a lot of teachers now, and whether it's the word incidentally or here, there, now, then, after the phrase was if it comes up organically. I mean, but it's not a lesson plan. It's not, and again, I think it's because of the, it's just they don't feel safe. Back in 2016, there was a report that said somewhere around in the realm of 40% of all teachers weren't going to teach the election that year because they didn't feel safe. And I wish there would be more research and information coming out about that.
Yeah, I wish so too. It's scary. Richard, what about you? Overseas, is that same type of fear exist? I would imagine it does not.
It does not. It's overcome by curiosity.
Yeah.
There's this kind of mix where some people, it couldn't possibly actually be like that, right? And that's what they approach it as. And then there's other people who are like, they really want to ask, and they're so curious, but it's also like they never in their wildest dreams thought something like this would happen in America, and they're just bursting to ask someone who knows something about it. And so, yeah, the reticence isn't there, but there's also, keep in mind, a lot of the reason I think teachers in the U.S., and I don't like speaking for other people, but I think in this instance, we've mentioned and touched on it already, there's legitimate fear, right? There's actual consequences sometimes, and the climate that teachers are in the U.S. is different. I happen to think that part of the reason we're in that climate is the reticence to talk about these things. And I also very much think that unless you have the skill to be able to talk about them and help students talk about them without breaching trust or without losing trust, then you shouldn't. And that makes it harder to do. So in this case, colleagues will come into the staff room, and they're also have to remember that Trump's election happened at the same time or right after, actually, Brexit happened. And it was almost like the British teachers and American teachers like, well, yeah, you see what happened today in my country? We're just one-upping each other with the stories. Yeah.
And you know what you said a few minutes ago, and somebody said this a few minutes ago, I got to say this, quote, I didn't think that anything like this would ever happen in this country. Okay? Are we forgetting the Civil War? That happened.
Right.
That the whole country.
Well, I mean, foreign teachers weren't around for that.
The southern states fired on a federal Fort Sumter. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been through this kind of thing, and that's one of the challenges of being in a democracy. Quite obviously, I mean, this kind of stuff happens, and actually turnover in governments happens all the time. All right, and in other countries. All right, and to not expect it here, and maybe that's the challenge. We haven't been teaching it right, that maybe we should be expecting this kind of thing. Maybe we should be, you should pardon me, don't you guys say it, I will say it, having Congress act like a bunch of dopes. It's been doing that for 150 years, 250 years. Okay? They're crazy. All right? Well, they all, the whole job is to get reelected. That's what it's become. Okay? And I was talking to a group earlier this morning, and they're cutting all the Javits funding, $16 million total for gifted education. Okay, and you're talking about a drop in the bucket of the federal budget. And I said, well, what do these guys know about gifted education? What the hell are they doing? Okay, and this is the way democracy works. It's not pretty. All right, and maybe we have to bring it up in front of them and say, yeah, this kind of thing does happen on occasion. And how are we going to handle it from that point forward? And the way we approach it, I love what Peter said at the beginning. Peter may be going for an A+, I don't know. Okay, when he said, it's trouble. Okay, watch it, Jerry. Okay, when he said, that we got to look, is it an insurrection? I love that question. Is it an insurrection? Is it a rebellion? Is it a party? What the hell's going on here? It's great stuff. All right, I wish you all get it right. This was a wonderful discussion. Can we do it again sometime in 2024?
Love it.
Sure. I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I'm going to
ask. I like this. Is fun. Okay, so Peter, I don't have their email, so you're going to send that to me if you don't mind. Okay, and I will get in touch with you. We're going to set up to do it again. We'll do it again on January 7th and see what happens. No, we'll do it afterwards. Okay, we'll see what happens. But you're right. We can talk about
Larry,
these things. Yeah,
I have a closeout for you.
Be my guest.
You know how I say that I don't share my politics? So 2 years ago, I had a kid, or just before COVID, I had one of my students stand up and And so they all know this phrase, I don't share my politics. It comes from this superintendent mentor of mine. He did the same thing, and that's where I learned it. That's what that's why I followed it. And he stands up in my class, and he says, oh, this is silly. We know what you are. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, it's obvious. You went to Berkeley. You live on the west side of Los Angeles. You drive a Prius, and you're a California social studies teacher. We know what you are. Yeah.
Solid Republican virtues so far. Yeah.
So there you go.
Right. There you go. You were there on January 6th. I can tell because it's exactly the profile of what they need on there. Yeah. Right. Unbelievable. So. Good Lord. Mm-hmm. Right. It is a crazy world we live in, and you guys have to teach about it. Okay. So I love you for doing that.
That's for sure.
Okay. It's
love being on the show.
Well, we love having you here.
Thank you, Larry.
We're going to get this group together again. I'm serious about that. We're going to do more in 2024. Is that okay?
I love it. It's the dream team.
Great.
It is the dream team. It is the dream team. Okay, and good. The Seahawks play the Eagles this week. Are you a Seahawks fan, Shari? I'm from Philadelphia.
Oh, my children's middle names are after the Seahawks. I moved here to be closer to the Seahawks. So, yeah, we got flexed to a Monday night game. I have to take a half-day personal day from school on Monday.
Are you going to the game? Are you going to the game?
Of course. I've been a season ticket holder since 2005.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm serious.
Do you think they'll win? I'm from Philadelphia. I don't live there anymore.
They will not
you
win.
don't think the Seahawks are going to win?
I wish they would win. Right. No, I wish they would win. It's been a rough few weeks, Larry.
The problem is, Shari, they always yell about the 12th man, but they need to yell about the 12th woman, and that's you.
Yeah, that's me. I should be raising the flag on Monday night.
Absolutely. Okay, tell Pete Carroll I said that. We need the 12th
I
woman.
will.
This is why they're having a crappy year. Okay.
That's right.
And enjoy that Singapore sling, Richard. Please enjoy it for me. Okay,
I appreciate that. I'll make sure that they make one in your honor.
Thank you very much. I will appreciate that. And Peter, as always, thanks a million. Just so you know, Santa Claus does come to warm weather places without snow. So look for him on Christmas Eve.
Well,
okay?
We'll do.
Thank you, bud.
Thank you again.
Thank you for putting this together. I appreciate it. Okay, thank you all, guys. Have a great holiday. Thank you.
Thank you, and to you too.
Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays, all. Take care.
You got it.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye.
Bye. What a great group. That was more fun than anything. Okay? That was Shari Condit, okay, from Woodland. I think it's Woodland School District. I have to write it down when she said it. Okay, an award-winning civics and history teacher, Southwest Washington State. Okay, Peter over at San Marino High School. And from the International School in Singapore, Richard Whitrock. That was great. Okay, but share this. This is fun. We're going to archive the show at ace-ed.org. I'm Larry Jacobs. Thanks for listening.